My dad grabbed my face. "Open your mouth." I shook my head until he pinched my nose shut. I gasped, and they poured it down my throat. I was 10 years old when I first realized something was wrong. My name is Emily Carter, and I grew up in Austin, Texas, a place where everyone seemed happy, except inside my home. People knew us as the Carters, the family that owned the most popular bar downtown. My dad, Mark Carter, was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with a confident smile and a voice that made people trust him instantly. He was respected, admirer, untouchable. To the world, we were perfect. At home, that charm turned into control. Dad didn't yell much. He didn't need to. The way he looked at you, that was enough. In this family, he always said, we stay strong. My mom, Linda Carter, early 40s, slim, and always perfectly dressed, loved attention more than anything. Her long blonde hair framed a smile that looked warm but never felt real. She was always on her phone, always filming. To her audience, we weren't a family. We were content. Jake Carter, my older brother, was everything my parents wanted. Tall for his age, lean, messy brown hair, easy smile. He adapted fast. He didn't question things. More than anything, he wanted their approval, and he knew exactly how to get it. "Sit down," Dad said that Friday night, placing 2 small glasses on the table. The smell hit me, instantly sharp, burning. "Training night," he smiled. Jake grabbed his glass first. "Easy," he muttered, and drank it in one go. He coughed, but forced a grin. "That's my boy." Dad laughed, proud. Mom lifted her phone. "Look at him, so strong." Then they looked at me. "I don't want to," I whispered. The room went quiet. Dad pushed the glass closer. "You'll learn." Jake leaned in. "Just do it. It's easier." I didn't move. Through the window, I saw Mr. Blake, our neighbor, a thin man in his 50s, always pretending to mind his own business. He looked inside, saw everything, and looked away. That's when I understood the truth. Everyone saw. No one cared. Dad's voice cut through the silence. "Drink." And just like that, training night began. By the time Jake turned 14, he had mastered the one thing that mattered in our house drinking. He was taller now, nearly 5'10", with a lean athletic build and a confidence that made people gravitate toward him. Dad would brag about him to anyone who walked into the bar, calling him a natural. I watched it happen night after night, Jake laughing beside him, a beer in hand, while I sat in the corner, invisible. The more he drank, the more they loved him. I was the opposite. At 13, I was thin, quiet, always observing. I kept my dark hair tied back, trying not to draw attention. I did well in school, avoided parties, avoided them. That made me the problem. "You think you're better than us?" Mom would say, her tone sharp but smiling for the camera. I didn't think I was better. I just didn't want to become them. The difference in how we were treated became impossible to ignore. Jake could stumble into breakfast half drunk and get a laugh. I could get straight A's and barely get a nod. Dad started taking Jake to the bar more often, letting him stay late, teaching him real business. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even considered. On Jake's 16th birthday, Dad handed him the keys to a used Mustang dark blue, polished like a trophy. Jake's face lit up like he'd won everything. Meanwhile, I got a part-time job at a small bookstore downtown. Mrs. Harper, the owner, was a kind woman in her 60s with soft gray hair and gentle eyes. She never asked too many questions, but I could tell she noticed things. My best friend Mia Torres, a petite girl with curly black hair and sharp, observant eyes, started asking questions. Your family isn't normal," she said one afternoon. Mia was fearless, the kind of person who spoke the truth even when it was uncomfortable. I brushed it off, but deep down I knew she was right. That's when I started writing everything down, every training night, every forced smile, every moment Jake chose them over me. I hid the notebook under my mattress, my hands shaking every time I opened it. It wasn't just writing anymore, it was proof that I wasn't crazy, proof that one day, if I needed it, I could tell the truth. I left Austin the morning after graduation, with one suitcase and a silence I had been holding for years. At 18, I was 5'6", slim, guarded, with dark eyes that noticed everything and trusted nothing. UCLA felt like another planet sunlight. Noise, people who laughed without slurring their words. For the first time, I wasn't watching my back at dinner. I didn't tell anyone why I left so fast. I just knew I couldn't breathe back there anymore. My roommate, Sarah Miller, was 20, tall and pale with short ash blonde hair and tired blue eyes that looked older than her age. She moved carefully, like her body remembered things it didn't want to. On the second night, she told me she was in recovery, 2 years sober, no shame, no drama, just truth. You don't have to drink to belong here, she said. That sentence stayed with me longer than anything my parents ever taught me. Living with Sarah changed everything. She woke up early, drank coffee, went to meetings, studied, laughed, really laughed. No bottles hidden, no forced smiles. I watched her rebuild herself piece by piece, and something inside me cracked. Maybe my family wasn't normal. Maybe I wasn't the problem. Maybe this quiet, steady sober was what life was supposed to feel like. Sarah brought me to my first support group. The room was small, filled with people of different ages, all carrying stories heavier than mine. No one judged. They listened. I didn't speak at first, just sat there, hands clenched, but for the first time, I felt safe, like I didn't have to pretend. I started running soon after. At first it was just to clear my head, but it became something more. Every mile felt like I was outrunning my past. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but it was clean pain, honest pain. Not the kind that came in a glass. That's where I met Daniel Hayes, 22, tall and lean, with messy brown hair and calm, steady eyes. He had a quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need attention. He trained for marathons too, always running alone, always focused. We started talking after practice, small things at first. He listened more than he spoke, and somehow, around him, I didn't feel broken. I came back to Austin for Christmas, carrying something, fragile hope. Months in California had reshaped me. I was still slim, but stronger, more grounded, my thoughts clearer than they had ever been. I told myself I wasn't that powerless girl anymore. Maybe if they saw the difference, they'd listen. Maybe this time things could change. In my bag were bottles of non-alcoholic beer, carefully packed, like they meant something bigger than they did. It wasn't just a drink, it was proof that another kind of life existed. One without pressure, without fear. I kept imagining us sitting together, talking like a normal family. I should have known better. The moment I stepped inside, the house felt the same, heavy, familiar, suffocating. Dad, still tall and commanding, greeted me with a firm clap on the shoulder, his smile controlled, watching. Jake stood nearby, now broader, his once athletic frame slightly worn down. His movements were slower, less certain. Something about him felt off. That night, relatives filled the house, voices loud, glasses clinking endlessly. Mom moved through the crowd like she was performing, her blonde hair perfect, phone raised, live streaming everything. "Our college girl is back," she announced, camera already pointed at me, capturing every reaction. When I placed the non-alcoholic beer on the table, laughter rippled through the room. "Oh, look at this," Mom said sweetly, but her eyes were sharp. "Too classy to drink with us now?" A few relatives smirked. I forced myself to stay still, but the heat in my chest grew. This wasn't curiosity, it was humiliation. Jake reached for a glass, but I noticed it, his hand trembling slightly. When he laughed, it came too late. Too forced. Under the warm lights, his skin had a faint yellow tint I couldn't ignore. "You good?" I asked quietly. And he brushed it off, taking another drink. Dad didn't even notice, or pretended not to. As the room grew louder, the tension tightened around me. I hadn't come home to fix anything. I had walked back into something already breaking. The party dragged on, louder, messier, heavier. I stayed near the edge of the room, arms crossed, trying to stay invisible, but I could feel Dad watching me. I wasn't the same girl anymore. Still slim, still quiet. But there was something in me now that didn't bend as easily. That difference made me a target. "Enough of this," Dad said suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise. He grabbed my wrist, his grip firm, dragging me toward the kitchen. Mom followed, phone in hand, still filming. "Don't embarrass us," she whispered. A glass was shoved into my hand. Drink. I shook my head. That was all it took. His hand moved to my jaw, forcing it open. I struggled, panic rising, my body fighting back, but he was stronger. I caught Jake's eyes across the room. He stood there, frozen, his tall frame swaying slightly, his face pale, and his hands trembling. For a second I thought he'd step in, say something, do anything, but he didn't. He just looked away and took another drink. Somehow, in the chaos, I managed to reach my phone. My fingers shook as I hit record, angling it just enough. Their voices, their laughter, the force in their hands, it was all there. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was documenting. Through the window, I saw movement. Mr. Blake again, standing outside, phone raised this time. His thin figure half hidden in the dark, recording just a fragment of what was happening inside. Not enough to stop it, but enough to prove something. When they finally let go, I stumbled back, my throat burning, my chest tight. I didn't say anything. I just walked to my room, locked the door, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. As the phone rang, one thought settled deep inside me, cold, final, undeniable. I didn't have a family anymore. The police arrived within minutes, red and blue lights flashing against the walls that had witnessed everything. I stood there shaking, still slim, still trembling, but this time I wasn't silent. I tried to explain, but Dad stepped forward first, calm, composed, his voice smooth as ever. My daughter's been struggling, he said. She's been unstable since college. And just like that, the truth started slipping away from me. One of the officers, tall, broad, late 30s, with a tired expression and a badge that read, Officer Grant, hesitated, glancing between us. Dad smiled, clapping him on the shoulder like they were old friends. You know me, he said quietly, and somehow that was enough. The questions shifted, not to them, but to me. By morning, it was everywhere. Mom had posted on Facebook photos, videos, captions dripping with fake concern. Pray for my daughter, she's lost herself. Comments flooded in, sympathy for her, judgment for me. Friends, neighbors, even distant relatives, all turning, all believing her version. I watched it happen in real time, my world collapsing one notification at a time. I tried calling Mia, no answer. Messages left unread. The silence felt louder than anything. I sat alone in my car, parked outside the house I couldn't go back into, realizing how fast everything had changed. I wasn't just misunderstood, I was alone. Later that day, 2 officers showed up again, this time different ones. One of them mentioned an evaluation just to be safe. My chest tightened. I knew what that meant. I wasn't just losing my family, I was about to lose control of my own life. Everything I said sounded like a defense. Everything they said sounded like concern. Then my phone buzzed. Sarah. Then Daniel. Sarah's voice was steady, grounding. Daniel's quieter, but firm. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just said, I believe you. And Daniel Hayes, still calm, still composed, showed up that night, standing beside me without hesitation. For the first time since everything fell apart, I wasn't completely alone. The call came just before sunrise. My hands were still shaking from everything the night before when my phone lit up with an unknown number. This is St. David's Medical Center. Your brother has been admitted. My chest tightened instantly. When I arrived, Jake looked nothing like himself. Once tall and confident, now pale, his skin faintly yellow, his body weak against the hospital bed. Tubes ran into his arms, machines beeping softly. For the first time, he looked scared. When we were finally alone, his voice was barely a whisper. I tried to stop, he said, eyes unfocused. His hands trembled, worse than before. They wouldn't let me. That was the first crack. Jake, the perfect son, wasn't in control. He never had been. Later that day, I went back to his apartment. It was messy, bottles everywhere. But hidden beneath his bed was a small box. Inside, USB drives, notes, and videos. I pressed play. There he was, refusing a drink, and Dad forcing it into his hand. Another clip, Mom laughing, pouring more into his glass. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just my story anymore. That's when Dr. Nguyen stepped forward. He was in his late 50s, thin, calm, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had lived next door for years, quietly observing. I've seen enough, he said. He provided medical insight. Jake's condition wasn't sudden. It was years of damage, years of being pushed. Word spread faster than I expected. One message turned into another, then more. Other families, people I grew up around, started speaking up, quietly at first, then louder. Stories that sounded too familiar, forced drinking, pressure, silence. It wasn't just my family, it was a pattern. Sitting beside Jake's bed that night, I realized something had shifted. The narrative my parents built was breaking, piece by piece. Evidence, witnesses, truth, it was all coming together. For the first time, I wasn't fighting alone, and for the first time, they were starting to lose control. The hospital felt different that night, quieter, heavier, like everything was holding its breath. Jake lay pale against the sheets, his once strong frame now fragile, his breathing shallow. I stood beside him, still the same Emily Slim, guarded but no longer afraid to speak. When the doctor, a middle-aged surgeon named Dr. Patel, calm and precise, told us a donor had been found, hope finally broke through the fear. Hours later, the surgery began. I waited, and for the first time in years, I prayed. While Jake fought for his life, everything else collapsed. Investigators came, statements were taken, Dr. Nguyen testified, steady and unwavering. Other families spoke out, their voices no longer quiet. My parents' perfect image cracked beyond repair. The truth wasn't hidden anymore, it was everywhere. Jake survived. Weeks later, and he looked different, not just physically stronger, but clearer, present. Rehab wasn't easy. He struggled, relapsed emotionally, fought himself every day. But this time, he chose to stay. The boy who once chased approval was finally learning to choose himself. Months passed. I stood at the starting line of my first marathon, heart steady, breath controlled. Running had always been my escape. But now it was something more, it was proof. Every mile carried me further from the past. When I crossed the finish line, exhausted but smiling, I realized I had made it out. Daniel was there waiting. Same calm presence, same quiet strength. He wasn't loud or dramatic, just steady, the kind of person who stayed. We didn't rush into anything, but somewhere between long runs and late conversations, something real began. Years later, I stood in front of a room full of people sharing my story, not as a victim, but as someone who survived. Jake sat in the front row, sober, healthy, holding his daughter in his arms. He looked at me and said, "It ends with us." And for the first time, I believed it. So, what would you choose? Expose your family or protect them? Stay loyal or walk away? Was I strong or selfish? Comment your choice below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories.